Elena Carver and her son, Micah, seek a fresh start on a lavender farm in rural Oregon. But their peace is shattered by eerie occurrences tied to the fog-laden hollow behind their property. When Micah mentions shadow people and strange carvings appear, Elena uncovers a chilling connection to her estranged mother and a vanished cult called the Circle. As whispers, mysterious photos, and a haunting locket draw her deeper into the hollow's secrets, Elena confronts a figure that claims her as part of a dark prophecy. Determined to protect Micah, she faces the truth about her past only to find the threat lingers in a new carving on her porch. The lavender field stretched out like a purple sea, rippling under the late September sun in southern Oregon. Elena Carver stood at the edge of her farm, wiping sweat from her brow as she surveyed the rose she'd spent 2 years coaxing into bloom. The air carried the sweet, calming scent of lavender, but it did little to ease the knot in her stomach. This place was supposed to be her fresh start, a refuge after the divorce that had left her and her son Micah untethered. But lately something felt off, like the quiet wasn't as empty as it seemed. At 10, he was all elbows and knees, his dark hair perpetually messy from running through the fields. "Just checking the plants, bud," Elena replied, forcing a smile. The locals called it the Hollow, a fog-choked dip in the land where pine trees loomed like silent sentinels. Elena rarely ventured there. The ground was uneven, the air damp, and the stories about the Hollow, whispered by townsfolk at the feed store, made her skin prickle. She shook off the thought and headed toward the house, her boots crunching on the gravel path. The house itself was a weathered 2-story with creaky floors and windows that rattled iced tea, and leaned against the counter, watching Micah through the kitchen window. He'd abandoned his sketchbook and was tossing a stick for their dog, Juniper, a scruffy mutt who bounded after it with relentless enthusiasm. Something caught her eye, a flash of movement too quick to pin down. "Mom!" Micah's voice snapped her back. He stood at the edge of the porch, pointing toward the hollow. Elena's glass paused halfway to her lips. "Shadow people?" she asked, keeping her tone light. They were dancing down there. The fog was thicker now, curling over the fence like smoke. "They waved at me," he added softly, then turned back to his sketchbook as if he hadn't just sent a chill down her spine. Elena forced a laugh, ruffling his hair. "You and your stories, kiddo. Come on, help me with dinner." Micah wasn't one to lie, and something about his tone, calm, certain, made her uneasy. The posts were sturdy, the wire taut, but as she neared the edge of the hollow, she froze. Vandalism, she thought, her jaw tightening. Kids from town, probably. She ran her fingers over the carving, the bark rough against her skin. For a moment, she thought she saw a shadow shift, a flicker of movement that vanished when she blinked. That evening, Tom Haskell stopped by, his pickup rattling down the gravel drive. He carried a basket of apples, a neighborly gesture Elena appreciated, but didn't fully trust. "Thought you and the boy might like these," Tom said, setting the basket on the porch. Tom hesitated, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he didn't want to spit out. He shrugged, already turning back to his truck. "Just stories. Keep an eye on Micah, yeah?" That night, after Micah was asleep, Elena sat in the living room, the house creaking under the weight of the wind. The hollow was invisible in the dark, just a void beyond the porch light's reach. Elena's breath caught. She set the book down and crept to the window, parting the curtain. Her heart pounded as she strained to listen, but the whispers stopped, leaving only the hiss of the wind. Chapter 2. Traces in the Fog. The morning after the whispers, Elena woke with a headache that felt like a vice around her temples. The lavender fields outside her window looked serene in the dawn light, their purple rose swaying gently. She checked on Micah, still asleep in his room, his sketchbook open to a page of jagged spirals that mirrored the carving she'd found on the pine tree. She brewed coffee strong enough to strip paint and stood at the kitchen sink staring out at the hollow. The fog was thinner today, revealing patches of gnarled roots and moss-covered rocks, but it still felt like the valley was hiding something. Elena shook off the thought and focused on the day's tasks, harvesting lavender, checking the irrigation lines, keeping Micah from wandering too far. Routine was her anchor, and she clung to it fiercely. His eyes were bright, but there was a hesitance in his voice, like he was testing her. "No going near the fence, okay?" He nodded, but his gaze flicked toward the window, toward the hollow. "Micah, what do you mean by that?" He shrugged, pushing a soggy cornflake around his bowl. "Stuff?" Elena's voice sharpened despite herself. "What kind of stuff?" Elena forced a smile, her mind racing. "Okay, bud, no more gifts for now, all right? Let's keep the lavender for selling." She ruffled his hair, but her hand lingered, protective, as if she could shield him from whatever he was seeing. After breakfast, she sent Micah to the tool shed with strict instructions to stay put. The air grew cooler as she approached the fence line, the scent of lavender giving way to damp earth and pine. She found the carved pine tree easily, its spiral symbol stark against the bark. But as she moved deeper into the valley, her flashlight caught more carvings, dozens of them etched into trees and even a few rocks. Spirals with slashes, some fresh, others weathered and moss-covered, like they'd been there for years. Her boots sank into the soft ground as she pushed through the fog. Near the base of a twisted oak, she stopped. There, half hidden under a pile of leaves, was a small bundle of lavender sprigs, tied with a piece of twine. Micah's gift. But the sprigs weren't scattered or wilted. They were arranged in a perfect circle, the stems woven together with precision. Elena's breath caught. No way a 10-year-old did this. She scanned the hollow, her flashlight beam cutting through the mist. She pocketed the lavender bundle and hurried back to the farm, her heart pounding. "You stay put," she called, her voice sharper than intended. He nodded, oblivious to her unease. "Back so soon?" she asked, trying to keep things light. Tom scratched the back of his neck, his eyes darting to the hollow. "Thought I'd check in." Elena frowned. "Heard from who?" "I didn't tell anyone." "Small town," he said with a shrug, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Back in the 80s, there was a group out there, called themselves the Circle. Folks say they never really left." Elena's skin prickled. "You're saying my land's haunted?" "Not haunted," Tom said quickly. He handed her another basket of apples, but this time, it felt like a bribe to drop the subject. She didn't. "What happened to them? The Circle?" Tom's jaw tightened. "Nobody knows. Sheriff at the time said they moved on, but they left stuff behind. Carvings, campfires, weird little altars. That evening, as she sorted through the mail, something slipped from the stack. A faded Polaroid photo creased at the edges. It showed her and Micah in the lavender fields, her bending to cut sprigs, him chasing juniper with a stick. Elena's blood ran cold. She hadn't seen anyone that day, hadn't heard a camera click. She shoved the photo into her pocket and checked the locks on every door. She installed a cheap motion camera on the barn, pointing it toward the hollow. But when she tested it, the footage was grainy, flickering with static. Night fell, heavy and thick. Elena sat in the living room, the Polaroid burning a hole in her pocket. Around midnight, the whispers started again. Soft, rhythmic, like a chant carried on the wind. The motion lights flickered, casting jagged shadows across the lavender. The whispers grew louder, not words but a cadence, like voices circling something. She checked on Micah, who was fast asleep, his sketchbook opened to another spiral drawing. Elena's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a faded photo of a woman, her face sharp and familiar with eyes that mirrored Elena's own. Her breath caught. It couldn't be. "Micah," she whispered, shaking him gently. "By the tree. They said it's for you." Elena's heart stopped. Chapter 3. The Truth in the Hollow. Elena hadn't slept. The locket lay on the kitchen table, its rusted surface glinting under the fluorescent light like an accusation. The photo inside, the woman with her eyes, her sharp cheekbones, stared back, unyielding. The resemblance was undeniable, but the idea that this locket, left by Micah's shadow people, could be tied to her was impossible. Outside, the lavender fields were still, but the hollow beyond the fence seemed to pulse with secrets, its fog thicker than ever. He sat on the living room floor, sketching spirals again, his pencil scratching in rhythm with the wind rattling the windows. "You okay, bud?" Elena asked, her voice tight. He nodded without looking up. Elena's throat closed. "Micah, no one's out there. It's just us." She tucked the locket into her pocket and grabbed her phone, dialing Deputy Clara Vance. Elena needed answers, not whispers or carvings or photos that shouldn't exist. Willow Creek's online archives were sparse, but a digitized newspaper from 1987 caught her eye. The article detailed the Circle, a reclusive group that had camped in the hollow for months, carving symbols and holding rituals no one understood. One night they were gone, no bodies, no trace, just abandoned tents, and those eerie spirals etched into trees.